What are those yellow plants that look beautiful, but they're very, very poisonous? Insert answer here. Cowslip. No, I don't think it's that. Anyway, there's so many of them here, a carpet of them. Although, if I were to make a picture, it would be a bit like when I'm taking photographs of bluebells. And these lovely carpets of bluebells, and you get it back and you think, oh, it's not really a carpet at all, it's a bit threadbare, a bit like the one in our dining room. I will make a picture just to show you where we are. I'm walking the paths today of Greenham Common again. It's just such a great place to come to make these photo walk shows. I am, over the next few days though, I'm going to be in London, Stonehenge and Avebury. You can be assured of a programme from those places being recorded. Programme, Neil? Programme? What year are you in? The 1940s? Let's make a picture, shall we? Oh no, a plane is approaching to break the beautiful silence. It's a lovely day today. I don't blame you for being up there in the skies. Must be wonderful today. A little bit windy, so could be a bit brisk up there. But otherwise, clear skies. Looks lovely. Blue skies. Here we go. Here comes the song from Neil, shining at me. Right. X100V is my camera today. Let's get a sketchbooker to start the day. F5.6. Oh, hang on. I haven't focused yet. You've peaked early. 1700 shutter speed, 160 ISO, blue skies, a puff of cloud just ahead of me, just up to the right. There we go. That's my sketchbooker to start the show. You're good, Barnes. Barney's with me, Sir Barkalot. He's not coming to Stonehenge. Lots of sheep around Stonehenge. And I didn't think it'd be a great idea for him to come on my London adventure. He's not great with traffic. When it's really noisy, it's like, oh, God, this is too much for me. I remember many moons ago, hold on to the railings, everyone. Neil's going to do one of his Remember When stories. But indulge me, please, other listener, because this dovetails with a story about my guest today. I remember many moons ago receiving a phone call on a Sunday morning, very early doors, in the days when the phone ringing on a Sunday morning was kind of an announcement that something reasonably important was happening. I mean, who called anybody on a Sunday morning? It was a sort of unannounced no in terms of etiquette, wasn't it? I cannot possibly phone them now. It's Sunday morning. No. I've got to wait till 3 p.m. at least. And maybe even then I'll have to have a written invitation. I was living at home in my early 20s and Dad knocked on the door and told me a man from the BBC was on the phone. And it wasn't any man. It was the controller of a radio station that lived only in my dreams as a possible place of work. Not happy to have been woken from my slumber and hearing Dad suggest the caller's name supposedly on the end of the line, I immediately jumped to conclusions, which is a bad habit of mine, and considered it could only be the typical hijapes of a friend of mine that always did this kind of thing. Previous calls had him claiming to be the King of Norway, for instance. So I picked up the phone and said, "Oh, John, surely you've got better things to do on a Sunday morning than phone me." Fortunately, the person on the end of the phone, who was neither the King of Norway or my oh-so-witty friend, and was indeed the name Dad had announced, had a very good sense of humour. And I ended up in the interview room. But that's another story for another day. So imagine the scene. You're a photographer and you've been making some pretty good inroads into a photographic career that in many ways was started by your wife saying, "Darling, there's this new thing called Instagram that all the cool kids are using." When somebody approaches you from the office of George Lucas and says, "You know, you may just be right for something we're doing for the latest Star Wars." This has got to be a joke, you think. Perhaps it's John. Maybe. I mean, last week he was claiming to be the King of Norway, for heaven's sakes. George Lucas on line 1? Surely not, I don't think so. Anyway, the recipient to that message is my guest today, a man who, until reasonably recently, I knew only as Mr. Whisper. Not Mr. Whisper, the Batman character who sold his soul to the devil in exchange for 300 years of life. No, the wonderful photographer Balwinder Batler, or Bal for short, better known, or AKA, as Mr. Whisper, a visual storyteller and professional photographer based in London. Over the last, 10 plus years, Bal has specialised in natural and delicious low-light street photography, taking us with him on his walks where the urban landscape transforms into a very different kind of place, where every pool of light or mysterious shadow becomes a photographer's muse.
Today on the Photo Walk.
When I started to use Instagram, which my wife actually told me about, she said, hey, all the cool kids in South Korea are using this new app. So downloaded it onto my phone and away I went. But a lot of the time, especially moving around at night, you're working with light and shadows and reflections. It's a really, really nice way to kind of just keep my audience curious. As the sun sets, everyone I like to say that the city puts on its makeup. They would clear out Canary Wharf station, as soon as they could at like 2 a.m. And then all the stormtroopers would rush in, go through the guards, go through the barriers with their Oyster cards. Photography has got me out of a lot of moments in my life which were really difficult.
Yeah.
And when you feel like there's nothing else that you can do and you're feeling very frustrated, I've always been able to turn to photography.
That's Bal, aka Mr. Whisper, my studio guest on the show today. Welcome along as we make our photo walks together, a show where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week, enjoying the letters and inspirational stories you send in and listening back to special studio conversations with guests from around the world. I'll take a peek into the mailbag in a moment for a flavour of today's letters into the show. But before that, thank you to our extra milers and MPB who sponsor this show and keep us here week on week. MPB is the largest global platform to buy, sell and trade in used photo and video gear, committed to making gear more accessible, more affordable. And now breaking with a bit of live read tradition, I had a word with a boss, i.e. loosely me, after Sam, Neil, Kelly, Andrea, Sir Barkalot and the other listener, and I wanted to read this to you from Martin Pendry, who also has a picture on the Shutter Sync feature today, so this is like a job lot of mentions for Monsieur Pendry. But I had this in from him, and it's got a wonderful connection to our friends at MPB. I'm visiting friends in my homeland of Norway. One of those friends has enjoyed his photography for many years, and a few years ago, when I was back in Norway last, he told me how disappointed he was with the price he'd been offered for his pre-loved kit. You see, he'd tried to sell some stuff on a Norwegian marketplace site, but with little success. I said, why don't you try MPB? So while we chilled in the evening, we did an instant quote, and it certainly raised the excitement levels. And then, it gets better, I like this story, Martin, he came to stay in the UK to complete the MPB process. Why? Because the MPB offer was more than enough to cover his flight as well. Anyway, now he carries a camera with a little red dot. And he was surprised to have MPB up their offer on his trade, having seen the quality of his kit that he was trading in. There we go. Nothing beats an actual real-life story from Martin Pendry. Thank you for it. Say it together. Buy, sell, trade, create. Go to mpb.com/change. There's lots of Norway being mentioned on the show already. And your mate Martin, he wouldn't happen to know the King of Norway, would he? Because there is a theme developing here today. On the show then, Matt Bobby has the most incredible personal story in a moment of how showing some pictures on a wall leads to a friendship with somebody so important in the photographic world. It's one of those you never quite know what's around the corner and who you might meet stories, mixed with a dash of sliding door epoch. There's Haiku from Chris Hughes at an Australian reservoir. How Colin Mayer's extreme sport experience turned into a love affair with photography instead. Sir Philip of Ferris is lost somewhere in the north of England. And as well as the assignment reminder, we have the flask winner from last month. And actually, you might have already heard the winner's name mentioned. There's a spoiler. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. SD cards or a spare roll of film, check. A lightsaber should we meet a stormtrooper along the way. Not quite as eccentric as it sounds, as you'll find out later on. Well, Neil, I can't quite say I've got one of those in my Tamrac camera backpack. My multi-utility screwdriver for camera base plates might have to suffice. Will that do? Yes, it will. Let's walk. This is possibly going to be one of our longer letters to start the show with, though I think it's a powerful way to start. I am beginning with this letter from Matt Bobby, which is in response to last week's show with Tatiana Hopper, when she was my guest, the YouTube educator and photographer. She said something that I could have been carrying around with me, I think, all week from that edition. It's like a wonderfully welcome echo bouncing from side to side in my consciousness. The greatest thing you can have, she said, or be as a human being, is not how much you have in life or conquer in life, but more so the impression that you can leave behind. And it's just stuck with me all week. Anyway, this from our friend Matt, who I think also found that moment to be pretty inspirational. Neil, several times on your podcast, you've asked for people to reflect on one photographer that they'd like to spend time with. I've had the great honour of spending time with one of my personal heroes. But funnily enough, for most of our friendship, I didn't even realise how truly important he was in the photography world. It was only at the very end of his life that I came to understand the magnitude of his life experiences in supporting and shaping the photography that you and I care so much about. I can't quite wrap my head around the sequence of coincidental events that led to this magic unfolding in my life, but here's the story. In 2016, after many months of hearing a friend of mine called Ryan talk about wanting to exhibit some photography in his shop here in Longmont, I finally said, well, okay, it's time to do this, Ryan. I tell you what, I'll bring some of mine in. I had some prints of photographs I'd made the previous year on the West Coast while on a year-long trip around the States with my wife and son, who was 6 at the time. I bought a dozen cheap frames, and up on the walls of Ryan's shop they went. Neil, I have to say, when I hung these, I was feeling somewhat vulnerable. I put my heart into my work, and it's so important to me, but I haven't really shown it. And I wasn't sure that anyone would get it, much less like it. Nobody came to the opening that Ryan hosted, but I told myself, oh, it doesn't matter. That's not why I do this. But a few days after I hung the photos, I received a phone call from Ryan, my friend, who said that a woman had come into the shop and was really excited about my photos. The next day she'd come back with this chap, her husband, to see the photos, and that he was keen to meet. I asked who it was, and Ryan said his name is Buzz Hartshorn, and that I should probably Google him if I didn't know his name. So I Googled, and up in the search results, I learned that Buzz had been the director of the International Centre of Photography, ICP, for decades. until 2012 when he retired after being diagnosed with Parkinson's. In the search results were photos of Buzz with lots of household names, including Annie Leibovitz. Well, Ryan and I met Buzz for coffee a few days later, and I have to say, he looked as nervous as I felt. He told us that after he'd retired from ICP, he and his wife, Patty, moved from New York to Colorado to be closer to their daughter. And that, by chance, started our friendship. This, Matt, this is one of those sliding door stories I absolutely love. Shush, Neil. Let Matt carry on. In the years that followed, Buzz and I spent a lot of time together, says Matt. We talked about photography. We went to galleries. And other times, well, we just go on long drives with the hopes of making some photos. Sometimes we did. Most of the time, we would just talk about life. One of the most notable things about Buzz is that he's very humble. He very occasionally would mention a photographer he met, like the time he met William Eggleston, and about meeting Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis one afternoon while she was meeting with Cornell Kappa at ICP, but he never bragged. And most of the time when he talked about photography, he'd simply just talk about his love of photography itself. We saw each other much less frequently through the pandemic. Buzz and his wife Patty were older and Buzz's health was declining. He was doing intensive treatments in efforts to stave off the Parkinson's, though dementia was starting to cloud his mind. A few years back, Buzz called me and asked if I would like some of his photography books. He thought I'd probably appreciate them. I came back that day with 50 or 60 books. As I looked through the books, I started to find little notes that he'd made to himself. The most remarkable thing to me was that some of the books had been signed by photographers like Man Ray. Buzz had never told me about his involvement with any of these photographers. It was only in looking through the books that I began to understand how deeply connected with the photography world he'd actually been. Well, Buzz's health and mind continued to fail. He wasn't able to go places and would become disorientated while talking. And about 6 weeks ago, Buzz's wife called to let me know that he was no longer able to live at home and was moving into a hospice facility. His health was declining fast, but she said, well, I've got some more books that we'd like to give to you if you could come over. While I was looking at the books, Patty pulled out one by Nan Goldin. Now, I knew that Patty had studied photography in college, but that day she shared that she'd actually been close friends with Nan. Patty was there in Nan's apartment while Nan was photographing the drag queens and making those early photographs that would later on make her famous in the photographic world. I learned more about Buzz and his life through 20 minutes with Patty than I'd learned from nearly a decade of friendship with Buzz himself, including how he'd helped so many photographers who hadn't got a profile to blossom and become established. Well, as we were talking, Patty pulled out a small photo album. In the photos that followed, there was Buzz with Richard Avedon, Annie Leibovitz, yes, Gordon Parks, Elliot Erwitt, Mary Ellen Marks, Ralph Gibson, Bruce Davidson, Sebastião Salgado, and others. To see my friend with these heavy weights of photography blew me away. Not just his relationship with these people, but the fact that he never once sought to impress me with them. He was simply my friend and I was his. Buzz passed away on the 29th of June. The comments that I've seen on ICP Instagram described Buzz as kind and warm and generous, respectful. My experience of being in a relationship with Buzz exemplified this. He was a truly beautiful person. I wish I'd had more time with him, and knowing what I know now, would love to have known him during the height of his career, or even his stories, of course, yes. Your podcast with Tatiana Hopper convinced me that I should share this story and a few photos with you. I apologise for the low quality of the images. They're at the moment pictures of pictures, really, quickly made. At some point, I hope to visit Patty and reshoot these properly. Thank you, Neil, for sharing the stories of so many amazing people on the podcast. They deserve to be recognised for the impact of their lives and their work. All the best from Matt. Well, Matt, when I read that, you used the phrase, you were blown away, I was blown away, and I went and had a good study of Buzz, and boy, do I wish I'd had the opportunity to have had a conversation with him about, well, not just the names, but his feelings about photography. Often when we talk to photographers on this show, it's their feelings about photography, and I'm talking about photographers that, have got a fair bit of experience, and some of them reasonably well-known names or even household names. It's their feelings, their thoughts, what they say about, what they express about, what they feel about photography that is often the most potent part of those conversations. And would I have loved to have had that opportunity to have spoken with Buzz, but you did. You did. You got to learn what he felt about photography, and that will forever be precious, of course, won't it? So thank you for your personal story about this most incredible man, and I shall include your photographs of those photographs on the show page today. You've also inspired the PS to come later on, and I'd like to play just a few moments of Tatiana Hopper saying those words that I think inspired this letter.
The greatest thing you can do as a human being really is not how much you can have in life or how much you can conquer in life, but more so the impression you leave behind and how many people you truly help. It's interesting because I read a book not that long ago, and it talked about there being two deaths. A death that is physical and a death that is metaphorical. So in the death that is metaphorical is what everyone more or less tries their life trying to achieve. And it touches on like what you can conquer, what you can have, what's your legacy. So it's connected to legacy. Now, that put in perspective quite recently why I do the things I do, not because I want my metaphorical death to be connected to material things, but more so what is immaterial. I want to be able to leave one day and know that whatever my life ended up being, at least at this precise moment in time, for instance, that I'm creating things and I'm putting things out there that are contributing positively to the creative people in this world.
I often use the word privilege when referencing the letters, the thoughts, the pictures and poems and so on that you send in. And I really am privileged. It's I said this last week, I'll repeat it again. It's an absolute privilege to make this program every week. It really is. And I think I called it a highlight of the week. I think that might be an understatement. We'll have this month's assignment later, along with a flask winner from last month. Now, a couple of months ago, the theme of the assignment was flight. And Colin Mayer had a story about flight that led to an unexpected story about photography. And I'd like to share his letter with you before I play you the first part of today's conversation with Mr. Whisper. You'll be used to a lot of my guests saying that it was a dad or another relative that first introduced them to photography, but that's not always the way, of course. And sometimes we find photography through another way altogether, via a totally different kind of story. From Colin Mayer, then, and the picture that goes with this story will be on the show page today. It's a story about paragliding. To start with anyway. Flight, says paraglider Colin. There is no greater feeling of freedom achieved than through free flight. Taking to the skies under your own leg power, floating in the breezes created by the winds gently flowing over a hillside, or soaring to great heights with wedge-tail eagles. It's fantastically calm and peaceful. And magical, I would imagine, from what you've just described. The peace comes from searching for lift, with only the sound of air whipping through the paraglider strings for company. But it can also be terrifying at times. Without an engine to push you along, you rely on skill and knowledge to be able to read the weather and stay safe. I gave up the sport of paragliding about 10 years ago, after I stood on a steep hillside waiting for a rescue helicopter to winch to safety a fellow pilot. He landed very heavily due to unexpected wind gusts and very turbulent conditions, which had forced a number of us to head for a safe landing. It came upon us suddenly and without warning. The only difference between him and me was that I made a safe landing and he didn't. A broken pelvis and lower back, a flight to the hospital was the only flying left to do that particular sad day. Shortly after, I sold my paraglider, my harness, my flying suit, instruments and so on. I'd never paraglide again, I said. I bought my first DSLR camera with the money from that sale and discovered a new freedom, the freedom and the peace of photography. I think that's a fantastic story. And, with a few exceptions, photography, I think, generally is a much safer pastime than paragliding. And I'll be sure to include Colin's high-flying picture on the show page today. Right, time to introduce my guest this week, who is a friend and friend of the show, but has never really featured within this, he hasn't really featured at all within this title when it comes to podcasts anyway. So I want to put that right today. I really do enjoy the unexpected photographic business success stories that we sometimes come across on the show. And this one, by unexpected, I mean, is a series of happenstances. The artist and photographer, in this case, Mr. Whisper, finds themselves working in photography in a way that certainly wouldn't have formed sentences in a more formal business plan to the bank. So I enjoy this story for the way that, in a way, none of it was really planned at all. It's proof of the universe, and forgive me for sounding a bit woo-woo for a moment, it's proof of the universe sometimes rewarding somebody for being naive to the so-called, "Oh, pups, come out of there. Sorry, Mr. Whisper. I'm introducing your piece. Look at you." He's just gone straight into that muddy brook. Shower for one, as I said last week as well. Where were we, Mr. Whisper? Oh yes, it's proof of the universe sometimes rewarding somebody for being naive to the so-called way things are done. And it's a wonderful story about having an open mind and open heart, to sort of quote Marissa Roth, another friend of the show. The streets of London are Mr. Whisper's muse. He has a book out soon about the beauty of the streets after dark, which I know will be a great success. And he's even had a dalliance with the Force, i.e. Star Wars. One of the most iconic quotes in all of Star Wars history is when Obi-Wan Kenobi says to Luke Skywalker, "Trust in yourself, believe in yourself," with a far more authoritative voice. And I think today's guest has found the ability and enthusiasm to do just that. Two parts then today to our conversation. Here's part one, where I try to unpick how he made the leap to becoming a professional in a difficult to break into professional world of street photography. We also talk about leaps of faith and brand. It seems that the B word, brand, isn't just for those earning money from this thing that we love. So here is part one of my conversation with Mr. Whisper.
Bal, I've had the good fortune to have spoken with you a few times now, on stage at an event in London for the FujiCast podcast, but never for this podcast. And in that you spend a lot of time on your pegs walking, I thought, this is probably a good opportunity, with a book coming out, which we'll talk about later on, to ask you a few questions for this podcast. First of those being, why Mr. Whisper? Is it your ability to sneak silently around and capture pictures with nobody noticing?
Originally, the name Mr. Whisper was born from my graffiti tag. I used to do graffiti back in the day when I was in art college. And I remember there was a guy in my local area who had a tag that rhymed. And I thought, oh, I want a tag that rhymes as well. So I came up with Mr. Whisper. And then once I kind of stopped doing graffiti at art college, when I got into work and stuff and social media came about, I didn't really trust the internet. So I thought instead of using my real name on all the platforms, I would use Mr. Whisper. And so, yeah, it's just stuck since then. And yeah, it's worked quite well as a brand. People seem to remember it and I kind of like it.
When I look at your photography, you are the master of low light. I know you don't just shoot in low light, but the sort of very dark, delicious low light tones. Is that a style that you developed? Is that a style that you're conscious about?
Yeah, I kind of got drawn into low light through street photography in general, mainly when it was way back when I made my transition from a smartphone. So my photography career began with a smartphone, and that was thanks to Instagram making photography really kind of inviting to the masses. Because previous to that, I was working in advertising as a creative director, and everyone said that I should always have a camera with me. And I was like, no, they're far too technical. And that's why I just liked shooting with my smartphone. And as part of my job, I was, heavily involved with social media. So being able to upload stuff every day with my phone was very convenient. But as I started to get clients, and there was one client in particular where I was, I'd shot everything on a smartphone and we made a video. It was for Lacoste. And then at the end of it, they said to me, oh, we really love the photos you've made for us. And we'd love to put them in all our stores across Europe. And the issue with that was, I think I shot them on my iPhone 4 or 5, and they could only be blown up to A5. So
if that, at that stage.
Yeah. So it was a little bit heartbreaking for me to see the check being torn up. And it was at that point I went and decided I need to get myself a real camera, a big camera. And that's when I got introduced to the Fujifilm X-T1. I thought that was the camera for me. I'd gone in to buy a different camera, but after holding them in my hands, I felt no connection with them. And with the X-T1, I was immediately drawn to it because of the dials. I thought, shooting in auto mode on a phone and transitioning, now I've got to learn photography for real. So being able to see the exposure triangle in a physical form was really helpful for me and really what drew me to it. And then I went off I went on a break to Dubai. During the day, I'd be trying the camera out, but then also at night, I had some time to myself and I would go out and I would start shooting stuff. For me, that was the real eye opener, because previously, whenever I'd shot with my smartphone, shooting at night, I would always shoot with a tripod in order to get the best quality images. Yeah. And I remember starting to look back at my photography portfolio and thinking, gosh, everything's looking the same, especially when I'm doing campaigns for like Google or whoever the smartphone was for. So with the X-T1, I was now able to shoot anything I wanted without a tripod. And I just thought, there's not many people focusing on low light photography, especially street photography at the time. And I thought this could be my new niche, because with my smartphone, I had shot a lot of stuff on the underground and then started shooting it with my X-T1. And again, that was quite a territory that most street photographers weren't shooting in. So with low light, the same kind of attraction was there that not many people were doing it. Maybe I could carve myself a new niche. And I just loved working with like the kind of available light.
Yeah. And I'm trying to get this idea of this shift between designer and photographer then, because it sounds like the period we're talking about at the moment with the X-T1, you were still essentially a designer, weren't you?
Yes, yeah.
So this is the crossover period to becoming a photographer. What made you make that shift then?
So I would have to say it was Instagram. That little app changed my life, to be honest. Yeah. I'd just been finished introducing the world to apps because Apple was my client. And we had to figure out how we could explain to the world what apps were and how people could use them.
Oh, it's your fault.
And I'm heavily into tech stuff as well. So at that point, I got headhunted by Samsung. Samsung said, hey, we love what you've done with Apple. We want you to come and do the same thing for us. And so I thought I'd love that opportunity, really like to test out all your gear. So it was through Instagram really that drew me into photography. So I would try out all the different platforms because I like to practice what I preach and know exactly how I could utilize them at work. But when I started to use Instagram, which my wife actually told me about, she said, hey, all the cool kids in South Korea are using this new app. So downloaded it onto my phone. And away I went. You know, I found street photography. I found that I enjoyed uploading stuff every day. And it was the community that started to really kind of encourage me to continue on that path. About a year went on and I thought to myself, I'd get home from work at about 8 o'clock and I'd just sit there on the sofa. Next thing I know, uploading photos, talking to the community. Next thing I knew, it was like 11 p.m. and I hadn't had dinner. I was like, I need to take this thing a little bit seriously. But how come like some of my friends are getting work out of Instagram and I'm not? And so I remember I put my email in my bio because at the time it wasn't a thing that was, that you would put up there automatically. So I just put it there under my bio. And I think it was in the next few weeks I got invited to shoot for Adidas, Jaguar and Lonely Planet. And I was like, wow, this could be the way, actually.
Could that happen now? I mean, it wouldn't happen now, would it? It's because you're an early adopter.
I think, yes, it was definitely down to the fact that I was an early adopter. It gave me a lot of opportunities. I think also the fact that I spoke the language. So it was a very kind of, unknown territory to both brands and to people themselves, because I had been kind of focused on it quite a lot. At work, I could speak their language. I could kind of give them the confidence that I would come back with the photos they needed. Plus, I had a different style at the time, but a visual language for my photography has always been absolutely key because I understand that brands want something that will have a synergy when you look at like a whole gallery of images.
You know who it is, in other words.
Yes. So it's good to have that, and I've always found that important.
Yeah. It does sound to me like the start of your photographic career was this is one wonderful sliding doors range of happy accidents. Your wife saying, excuse me, hubby, have you heard of this thing the cool kids are using? You're commuting and you find Instagram and all these things come together. What had Samsung employed you for, though? Because this sounds like this was the swan song job before you became full-time photographer.
So they had employed me to basically as digital creative director to look after all their digital work. But as well as that, social media was slowly growing and they said, how can we utilize, socials within our campaign?
Yeah.
I was using Facebook, I was using Tumblr, I was using WordPress, Twitter. And then eventually when Instagram surfaced, that's what really connected for me. And I tried to work with them on as many projects as I could so I could go solo.
Yeah. Now, we could well have had you on the end of June's show to talk about, I feel like this is a bit of a Mr. Whisper sandwich, actually, because we could have had you talking about social media on our end of the month special for social media. So I am going to take this opportunity to ask you about that. But I know you're coming back in a few weeks because you're going to talk to us on the next special, which is all about street portraiture. So you're coming along a little bit like buses, Mr. Whisper, in that respect. But one of the things we talked about in terms of Instagram is how people have kind of fallen out of love with here we go, I'm going to mention the A word, the algorithm. Yet for you, Instagram is still such an important platform. How have you managed to stay friends with it, where other people have, in so many words, fallen out with it?
The key word is that you've said it yourself, is the algorithm. And I like to call it the balgorithm because I just don't worry about it. And actually, I just think it's something you can't control. I love writing down ideas and I love to be able to execute them and put them out on a platform that's not really going to judge me for it, is a great creative process for me. So I don't see it as my end goal. I see it as part of the journey. And If things work, they work. That's great. If they don't, then I just learn from them and move on.
That's interesting, actually, because I had a conversation with a photographer only a couple of weeks ago where he said to me, I use it as a sort of a mood board.
Yes, that's a really nice way of putting it, actually, I think.
There's a great deal of, I don't know, I think the word is mystery about your photography, particularly your nighttime photography. And as I was looking through your Instagram, your latest work of late, there's a lot of, you love being out in the rain. Good job you've got a rainproof camera. You love being out in the rain. You make photographs where people are in them, but they're not. Is that conscious?
Yes, it is conscious on probably two levels. Firstly, I think you've again hit the nail on the head. I love to have mystery in there. It's about inviting my audience in to complete the narratives that I'm trying to portray. So I don't want it to be, sometimes, you can see exactly, what you see is what you get. But a lot of the time, especially moving around at night, you're working with light and shadows and reflections. It's a really, really nice way to kind of just keep my audience curious. And then secondly, it's also very useful because my work is used commercially, and you'll need to have a model release form if there are faces in scene. So something I learned very kind of early on was the fact that if I have a good mix of photos, if I'm testing out a camera or whatever I'm using, if I have a good mix of kind of people's faces, which is what I focused on heavily at the beginning of my career, interactions between people, especially on the tube. But then slowly moving into this kind of land of mystery and more suspense and curiosity, which then invites people into kind of, and I see it more of like as a piece of art, because then I'm playing with the colors as well as the shapes and the negative space. So I think it's a mixture of the two, a personal thing that I like to do, and also for commercial value, it's very handy to have because I don't, normally get model release forms. And the one time we did it in a project at the Edinburgh Fringe. And it was a project where I was specializing in color. And then there was an opponent who was shooting in black and white.
Yeah.
And we would let social media decide whose photos were better. And I remember we'd be shooting the content and then we'd look at the photo. And if we liked it, we'd have two runners who would then chase after the people in the crowd. And then we'd have like a budget between 50 to 250 pounds to pay them for the model release. So that's what I say to clients a lot of the time. If you really want to do it, and we want to do this authentically, because I don't want to approach someone before I've taken the shot. I want it after the fact. So that was a way of getting around it, but not many clients really go for it unless they've got a nice big budget.
Yeah. I want to investigate the word brand a bit more, because brand is something that's associated usually with commercial entities or commercial outlets. Although I've heard it suggested of late that your brand is something you can have regardless of whether there's pounds, shillings, dollars and goats per square inch attached to it. Brand is something that you can have about you and about your photography. Tell me what you understand brand to be.
So for me, a brand is, it's like a person, basically. That's what I like to see it as. Like, it's the person that you want to portray yourself as to the wider public. So when I think about my brand and the values that it holds, and something that I learned early on with my brand, because I would be saying a lot more no's than yeses to projects, was because it just didn't fit with the brand. And the way that I could kind of filter that out would be, hang on, would this product actually interact with my real life? Because if not, I'm just making up a story for the sake of an advert. And I thought that the nice thing that came with social media was the fact that now we're speaking truths. Well, we used to. It was the soft form of advertising. So for me to build up my brand values was like, what kind of brands would I what kind of brands would I work with, and what brands I certainly wouldn't work with? What's my tone of voice when I'm speaking to the public? Like, I don't swear on my channel or anything like that, because I just don't feel it would be a very good proposition for a brand to have. As well as the kind of stylistic way that it's presented. It should have a synergy. So my photos should have a certain look and feel. So when they come out together, you know that that's come from like Mr. Whisper's voice or Mr. Whisper's brand.
When I look at your photographs, particularly on Instagram again, the cityscape is your playground. It definitely is. London, New York. Is it the wonderful Stockholm Underground that you went on to? Is it? Yes, it is, isn't it? Beautiful, odd, wonderful, beautiful, all at the same time. Would you be able to do the same thing if for example, you were in smaller towns or villages? Would your brand be able to work, or have people got so used to now the energy of the city landscape?
So that's a really good question, actually, because I do a lot of workshops, and I remember I was asked to go out to a very small town in Wales, do a photo walk, and I was a little bit worried about doing that because I wasn't sure how many people would be out on the streets and so forth. How much content will we get to shoot? And I will put my hands up and say it was a real struggle because, we went out, I think it was on a Thursday night. We had about a group of 10 of us. And I think we were more of a spectacle than anything else. So people would see us, a mile off.
Yeah.
Ask us what we were doing. And at that point, we weren't going to be able to get any candid shots. And then when we did get a few shots, people would come running out to ask what we were doing. I go for big city energy because I know you can blend in and you can act like a tourist and you look it looks very normal to have a camera with you. If I'm familiar with the area, I think it's easier for me to shoot. But I think my brand definitely wouldn't be the same if I was in a small village, living in a small village and making my content there, simply because it would be a lot harder. And I only learnt this through the process of doing it physically because, I mentioned earlier how I don't want to shoot faces. So that also avoids confrontation because if someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, did you just shoot me?" And I was like, "Hey, it's just your silhouette. It's just your shadow." Oh, that's totally fine. And I find that in big cities, it's much easier to get away with that. New York, Seoul, Tokyo. I've been to all of those with Vegas last year as well. So there's much more variety. There's much more energy that you can pick up when you're strolling around looking for those moments in big cities.
In terms of how you work, you do. I mean, you're a burn candle at both ends merchant, definitely. We've already mentioned a lot of your shots are at night, or if they're not, it's turning into night. What's the magic that takes you onto the city landscape at night? Yeah,
I think it's the fact that as the sun sets, everyone I like to say that the city puts on its makeup. The lights come on and everyone's out to have a good time because, I like to go out on the nights like Thursday's the new Friday night, Saturday night. But also the fact that I'm just working with natural light and I just find it a lot easier to find my scenes. If there's a beautiful lamppost that's just spotlighting a certain area, I know that if I hang around here, find my composition, that someone interesting is going to walk along, certainly at some moment in time. And, there's also the fact that it just adds this kind of cinematic style to my images. When I look at my daytime photos, they still don't have that certain magic that I feel my low light stuff has. And at the time, like I said, I was drawn into it from the fact that not many people were doing it. Now it's incredibly popular, but at the time it was definitely something that just felt different and a little bit unique.
Mr. Whisper is my guest today, and he'll be back for part 2 shortly, where we'll talk about this amazing knock on the door, metaphorically that is, from the massive franchise that is Star Wars. This way, pups. Oh, that sounds like where's that big dog? Did you hear that? That's not a dog, pups. That's Wolfie. He's gone trotting off in the other direction. This week's Poetry for the Path is Haiku. Now, if you don't know what haiku is a traditional Japanese poem consisting of 3 lines with a syllable pattern of 5-7-5, often capturing a moment in nature or an emotion. with brevity and simplicity. 575 will explain then why there are 17 pictures to come with this haiku, which will be on the show page today, from Chris Hughes. So from Chris, I just noted your request to the Facebook group for poetry submissions to the photo walk. My haiku and 17 images to go with it are below. As I say, they'll be on the show page. The piece is called Yan Yean, the historic reservoir in Victoria, Australia land, one of Melbourne's oldest water supplies, set in a rural and scenic landscape. The reservoir, says Chris, is in need of beautification to make the gardens what they once were. And so, Chris, here is your haiku called Yan Yean.
Old blue stone channels, old water from the hills flows, was once beautiful.
For your letters, your poems, your pictures, I love hearing from you, and so do those who walk along this with us on this podcast all over the world every single week. Please send them to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. If you are sending pictures, send them please, if you can, 2,500 pixels wide. That way they're optimized beautifully for the show pages. I've not made a lot of photos. Well, I've been making lots of photos, but I've not made a lot while I've been walking with you, while I've been recording. But trust me, I've been making them. You hardly need to see my pictures today, because there's a show page full of fabulous stuff. Let's just make one back along the path. There's a sunburst. That's why I've gone straight for it before the sun disappears, because some of the clouds are coming across. 1100 shutter speed, 160 ISO, f5.6. A sketchbook back along the path. And what's that noise in the background? Oh, we are a little bit closer. Pups, come on. Just a moment ago, he went running. Oh, you're there. How did you do that? Is that a magic... is that a magic skill you have? I'm sure he went off to the right. He's just come back in from a path to the left. Very clever. Magic dog. That noise that I was talking about as well, I think that suggests we're slightly closer to the industrial estate that's just over the way there, through these trees. Fortunately, I think the whatever was reversing, beep, 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 has stopped. Here's an interesting diary date. This date in 1923, in America land, the Hollywood sign was officially dedicated in the hills above Hollywood, Los Angeles, 101 years ago. So last year would have been the centenary. We missed that one. But in that we talk about photography and filmmaking, I thought this was a relevant diary date. I know you know what it looks like. I know that. But you may not know that it originally read Hollywood Land. And there was me thinking we were original in adding land to the end of place names. Not at all. But Hollywood Land is now simply Hollywood. And in case you're wondering where the last letters went on the Hollywood sign, it wasn't the other listener who nicked them. One night, returning squiffy from an evening out on the town, they were dropped after the renovation in 1949, when frankly it looked like it was just going to fall down. And they took the last four letters away so that the sign could reflect the entertainment business rather than real estate, which was what Hollywood Land was all about. There we go. Every day's a school day. Park that one for use at a pub quiz some stage. Right, the assignment this month, then I'll award a flask for last month's. For July, John Angerson has set the following: make a picture based on the word destroy. I guess we'll allow the theme to stretch to destruction, though of course I do realise there are subtleties between the two, but try this one on for size from John. Destroy could be interpreted as a positive challenge as much as a negative one, he said. You could destroy an idea to create a better one, or destroy your best idea because it was too obvious. As with most things in photography, turning things upside down, says John, can often yield unexpected results. So capture an image that conveys the concept of destroy. Maybe a haunting photograph of a decaying building that once stood proudly, now reduced to rubble and ruin. Alternatively, maybe a shattered object, capturing the moment of its destruction or the fragments left behind. Nature scenes as well can have stories of destruction. So destroy, destruction. The page is up and already some super pictures are coming in. Now, for last month, this is going to be tricky now. It really was tricky to take a picture from our challenge called Imperfect and reward just one picture with a flask, but I'll give it me best. The word imperfect was the challenge. It was set by John Dolan, who will be one of my first guests on a new podcast I'm hosting for wedding photographers. Oh yes, news of that to come at some stage. So there were lots of excellent pictures again. David Horn's picture made in the Oculus was just beautiful. Maybe too perfect in some ways to be imperfect. But I don't know. I mean, you'll have to go to the assignments page for June to see it. And I feel sure you'll say, oh, yes, look at that. But I've gone for one of the late entries. This one is from Martin Pendry. Let me read the description he sent in alongside this super picture that if it weren't for the new style sneakers and traffic cones in it could have been a picture from, I don't know, the 50s or something. Absolutely marvellous picture. Last Saturday, says Martin, I set off from home to join the iBike London Pride ride on the South Bank in London, camera slung jauntily across my shoulder. As I pedalled down the Mall towards Trafalgar Square, I found myself alongside a charming parade of ponies and traps driven by young men, adding a delightful touch of nostalgia to the scene. In my excitement, I can feel a uh-oh coming on here. In my excitement, I made a rookie mistake. The aperture ring had slipped out of automatic, resulting in a slow shutter speed. And while this means I missed the chance to capture crisp images of the elegant pony and traps trotting through Trafalgar Square, I still cherish the shot I did get, even if it's not perfect. So there's a note to self here: always double check your settings. But I'm so pleased you didn't on this one, Martin. It's perfectly imperfect, and I should be sending you a flask, which you can use to fend off cabs that drive too close to you in London land. You are a braver man than me for cycling in the city. If you'd like to send your pictures in for the assignment, I would love to hear from you. The address to send them to is stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. If you can optimize them to 2,500 pixels wide, you're an absolute star. If you're not quite sure how to do that, just send the full res. One picture, please, for this particular assignment. Send the full res to stories@photowalk.show, and I will, say it in unison, do the heavy lifting for you. One thing I would like you to check, if you could, because I've had a couple of conversations over the last week and a half maybe, with some of you who've sent in pictures, not realising that your email system is resizing them to the size of a small postage stamp. So we've been getting pictures that are 600 pixels wide or 480, or I think we had one as small as 200, something like that. So make sure that your settings on your email are not resizing to something you can only see with a microscope. I love to receive them, and look forward to showing yours on the assignments page. I'm off to London tomorrow, if you're listening to this on the day of release. Sir Mally of Treeland is coming down. Today, it being Friday, I'm taking him to the Stones in Avebury and Stonehenge. I've I've organised 4,000 pagans to be present. They're sharpening their feathers. We stopped Friday sacrifices quite a while back, last August, I think. These days, you just get held down, tickled on your feet. It's about as bad as it gets. Tickle with a duck feather from a willing mallard who answers to the Old English name of Eardrick the Ever Ready. Now we need to do a shutter sync. Thank you for those that you're sending in. The point of this is that you make a picture when I make a picture. Then you share it, and it shows where you're listening to the show. And as I say, I'm getting a lot of pictures of people that are, they're out commuting. We've had hoovering pictures, vacuuming pictures. But wherever you are right now, ready your camera. The pictures from today's Shutter Sync will be on the show page. And if you can send me a few lines of where you were, what you were doing, that would be great. Just pop your letters down there for a moment. Bring out your cameras or your smartphones. And I'm in woodland at the moment, so I'm just going to poke my camera back along the track and I'm going to make a picture. Right, here we go. 3, 2, 1, click. Hopefully you've done the same. And that is, where's Pups gone? That is where today's Shutter Sync for me, the picture, while I'm walking, was made. Send them into, once again, stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. Come on, Pups, this way. Come on, up, this way. Come on, this way. I love this. I've taken a picture of it before. It's a wooden path that's been shaped to go through this meadow area and brook area. And Barney's just, he's not bothered with the sort of wooden bridgey thing, the path that we're walking along. He's just gone straight through the brook. Look at you. You look like you're a different colour dog. Dark brown at the bottom, light brown at the top. While I'm talking about Mally and the adventures we're going to have, so yeah, we're going to London tomorrow. We'll make a programme there. And we're going to Stonehenge and Avebury, which I know we've done a show from before, but it's a fabulous place to take visitors who've never been there before. But while Sir Mally comes south from St Helens, near the wonderful historic port of Liverpool, we did a show in also recently. Friend of the show, Philip of Ferris, has been travelling north from Cornwall, which for those who don't know their English geography, is cause for concern, I'd say. Most Cornwellians have never gone further than the neighbouring county of Devon, or Bristol at most. It's such a beautiful place, Cornwall. Why would you ever want to travel out of it? So from Phil, we're having a photo adventure up north, he says, and we've gone by train, again. At Durham train station, we were surprised to hear the voice of a child making a recorded announcement. Kathy looked at me as if to say, was that really a child announcer? And I was able to reassure her that we were up north, and I recall reading history books about children in gainful employment in such remote parts. Philip, you'll have my best friends in the beautiful north of England land sending in letters of complaint. I think you'll find, Phil, that the Employment of Children Act of 1903 put a stop to sending children up chimneys, wherever you are in these lands. We had a somewhat poor photo walk around Durham, says Phil. No street shots for me. So we went to see the cathedral, the museum, and maybe the castle. Well, the cathedral was closed due to graduations. Never mind, I said. Let's walk up to the museum, which was also shut for construction and repairs. Oh, never mind, I said. Let's look around the castle as a backup plan. Third time lucky and all that. And that was shut as well, only open on certain days. So eventually we arrived in York. Now I carry Sean Tucker's book with me in case I bump into him for a signature. He being based in York. Well, last year he was in Germany or somewhere So this year I thought, he's bound to be about this time. Then I saw a post by him saying he's on retreat in Tuscany. What are the chances? By the way, if you're ever stuck for the definition of irony, we're now in a cafe called Barker's, and they just explained to a potential customer that they have a no-dog policy. Onwards and upwards, off to take some pictures. Love Phil and Kathy. Philip, I have no idea why Kathy puts you even remotely in charge of photo walks, but you are funny to spend time with. I think you should release a guidebook of places you almost got to see. The picture on the front cover could be a shop door, couldn't it, with a large closed sign. Anyway, make sure you pop in for a coffee on your way back down south. I'll be out that day. Right, part 2 then of my chat with Mr. Whisper. Here comes the bit about Star Wars. We talk about mental health as well, books, his new one included, and it wouldn't be a photo walk interview without the why at the end. So here's part 2 of my chat with Mr. Whisper, who's working in one of the cities of the world that hardly sleeps. He probably has never seen a sign that says closed.
This incredible roster that you have, these brands that you work with now, do you go to them or do they come to you? How have you managed to get your brand, your name out there, circulating?
I think this was another thing that drew me from Adland into photography, was the fact, when brands started, I put my email up and they started to approach me. Yeah. And I was like, this never happens in Adland. You have to pitch and then you go through like months and months of different work, and then maybe you get the work, then you get your first project. And by the time, from conception to execution, it's hardly what you first pitched in. But with photography, I found that I was able to, it sounds really big. I've never approached a brand, basically.
Never?
I have been lucky enough to, every brand I've worked with has approached me and understood what I do and had enough faith in what I do. And I remember one time I should ask them why they want to work with me. And, a couple of surprising things.
Never asked them that. No.
One was the fact that, they pointed to, when they send me a mood board, they send me photos of stuff that they want the campaign to kind of look at. And I'm very surprised at what they've chosen. I'm like, wow, I was about to delete that from my feed. I didn't like that one at all. But understanding how you can draw a wider kind of clientele by just keeping stuff when you're experimenting. Yeah. That was one thing which I learned. And then another one was when they said, oh, you came back as the most expensive. So we had most confidence with you. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting.
Well, there's a life lesson. Do you like working alone on commercial jobs? I mean, it appears to me that the life of a street photographer primarily is not a lonely one because you're with the world, but it's normally a lonesome occupation because you're there with your thoughts in your time. When you add in the layer of complication of working to somebody who has a brief, that usually means it comes with a stylist and a director and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I've had a few occasions where, I've had the whole team there because that's what the agency wanted. Yeah. And I enjoyed the moment, I'd say. I said, okay, so this is what it's like to be a real photographer, and you've got someone looking after lighting and you've got models on set. And I remember coming back and looking at the photos afterward, and I thought, I'm pretty sure I could have done this on my own without all the faff. Yeah. It was a great learning experience, and it's something I do miss. I really miss working in a team because there's that kind of sense of satisfaction when you've all completed a project together. You can go and celebrate, whereas when I finish a project, might be like, oh, okay, I'll shut the laptop and go and have a cup of coffee now and on to the next one. So I have mixed emotions about it, I'd say. That would be the best way to put it. I miss having that team camaraderie, but then I also love the fact that I'm in full control of the creative as what's going to be delivered and what's going to be seen.
Which is a really good dovetail, really, to mental health. It's a subject we often talk about on this particular show. Mental health, working out there with your camera looking through the eyepiece, feeling part of a different world for many people. In terms of mental health and photography, there is definitely a synergy there, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. Yes, for sure. I mean, photography has got me out of a lot of kind of moments in my life which were really difficult.
Yeah.
And when you feel like there's nothing else that you can do and you're feeling very frustrated, I've always been able to turn to photography. And something that I really enjoy about it is the fact that I feel with photography, I will never, ever be bored. I will always be able to put an idea or a passion project into my mind, and it will help me just get through those really hard times. And, you know, as we kind of touched on earlier, I think I've heard a lot of my friends have struggled with social media, you know, the algorithm, feeling like it's giving them a hard time. And I know some people have fallen into depression as a result of it. And I think those were all, you know, learning curves for me to say, look, I shouldn't take it so seriously. I have to remember why I started this. And it was just for the joy of creating pure visuals and sharing them with people. And, you know, as a result of that, which I didn't really plan, I've been able to have a career out of it for over a decade now. So I'm really thankful for photography to be able to give me that and give me that consistency.
Does it feel like a job?
It does now and again. There's, I guess the fact, because I do so much low light stuff now.
Yeah.
That for me is like, I need to kind of make it, like I said, I want it to have a new angle or freshen it up a little bit. So a personal plan for me, and I think something we're going to touch on later, is the fact that I'm going to start going out and approaching people for photos. Yeah. I want to move kind of more into fashion and change my direction a little bit, but keeping within low light, of course. But I think there's new territories for me to explore with the skill set that I've picked up over the years.
Well, there's a book coming out. There's a new territory for starters. Pre-orders you can make now. Book comes out 7th of August. Tell me all about it.
Well, it's been a labour of love, and the book is called London After Dark. Mm-hmm. And it basically documents over a decade of walking through the West End, collecting these magical moments. Yeah. And I didn't really think of it. I was approached by a publisher way back in, I think, 2019 to say, hey, we love the work that you're doing and we'd love to put a book together. You know, to me, that would be an incredible milestone in my career to have a solo book that was published, because the books I'd featured in before was with other photographers. And off the back of that, they offered me my own solo book. And so the first thing I said to them was like, no, I would really like to shoot everything fresh. You know, I want everything to be considered. So give me some time and like, we'll pick this up again in a year or so. And at that moment in time, the book was going to be called London in Transit. Right. Because I like to kind of give London its identity within my photos. So I would often include underground signs or framing people through taxis or through tube windows, which are all very kind of graphical elements. So I'd love the framing. I'd love all the colors. And again, the fact that it would tell a London story. But then COVID hit. We came out of COVID and I decided that, you know, looking at my collection of photos, I could make a more powerful book, or a book that makes more sense to me, which would be London After Dark. And yeah, so over the last I think it was the last 3 years, I've been curating like the photos that I've wanted in there. I've made sure that there's photos from as far back as I think 2014, and then chronologically it's not in chronological order. It's just it's kind of more of a visual, what works well together, page by page. And I'm just incredibly proud of like the collection as it sits. Makes me feel like I haven't been wasting every Friday, Saturday evening just walking the streets. But yeah, I love to see all those images put together in one place that will sit, you know, on people's coffee tables. Yeah. And genuinely for me, it's a nice piece of work now, but I think it will have more value in, say, 30, 40 years.
The nostalgia.
Yes, because that for me is what really encouraged me to make the book, is when I look at some of the greats and I see like London in the past and I see how people dressed, and I see the typography and the colors, it gives me goosebumps. And I was like, if I can make something which documents London at night in the same way, that would be an incredible achievement for me, and I'd be really proud to have something like that.
You mentioned the word curating or curation, and I'm going to have to work off memory here, but I'm sure the title was something like 5 Ideas for Curating Your Own Photo Book. It was on your Instagram feed. I saw that when I was looking through your work earlier on. Did you take leaves out your own book? And what were the suggestions you gave?
Well, I think it was the fact that I can't remember what the 5 points were exactly.
I should have written them down, shouldn't I?
Yeah. But I just remember the fact that for street photography, it moves quite quickly. And then when I'm sharing it on social platforms, the photos can be forgotten very quickly as well. So being able to go back, really look at your photographs, start to put them in some kind of order or groups, which was quite exciting for me. And then you start to see the patterns that you work in. It was very enlightening for me.
Yeah.
But then seeing like 10 years or a decade's worth of work come together, it was quite astonishing. And then the icing on the cake was that it wasn't digital. It was going to be printed and in a physical form, which for me just felt, I don't know, quite rewarding actually.
A cursory glance looking at your work, people might think, oh, it's mainly candid. But no, you do shoot street portraits, which we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks. However, I do want to come back to a wonderful project that I'm lucky enough to have heard you talk about on stage. And I love it because it's Star Wars. Who doesn't love Star Wars? I'm sure there's a few people. But tell me about the Rogue One. I mean, working with Disney as well. Hello. Tell me about that project.
Well, that's definitely one of my highlights of my career. I don't know the Disney story through and through, but just the fact that, they had George Lucas and a couple of other names in the email, I was blown away that they had chosen to work with me.
Yeah.
And at first I thought it was a joke. So I was immediately, called up the agency and said, hey, we should have a call or we should have a meeting. And they obliged. And at that point I was like, wow, this is real.
It is for real. Yeah.
and they want to work with me. And, the main reason that they had chosen to work with me was because they felt there was a synergy between my look and feel and the look and feel that was about to be presented in Rogue One. They had tasked me with coming up with a series, I think it was of 6 photos. And it was about trying to blend in like what I could find in our real world that would also kind of work within a Rogue One world. So, me shooting on the underground and knowing that they had shot a lot of the Empire scenes in Canary Wharf.
I don't recall you saying that. Is that right?
Yep. They
didn't
so they would clear out Canary Wharf station, as soon as they could at like 2 a.m. And then all the stormtroopers would rush in, go through the guards, go through the barriers with their Oyster card. And, I've got some behind the scenes shots of that happening. And then, it was military position to get it all done. They would dress all the signs and put like spaceship-like stuff on top of like the big signs. But, Canary Wharf itself, the station looks very much like a spaceship.
It's, it does. So rewinding, if I may, just a little to this fabulous opportunity. George Lucas, Disney, the Star Wars people, they've chosen you from the work you've put on Insta as much as anything to make the posters and pictures to promote Rogue One. So tell me about this dream brief and what you suggested to them then.
So I came up with 6 concepts, which I had to work very closely with the agency because, Star Wars is like a religion for some people.
I know,
so
yeah.
If I didn't know the story well enough, I wanted to ensure that these concepts would be plausible within the audience. I mean, another cool thing, which I didn't mention, was the fact that we were going to have all original props from the movie. So on the day after the concepts had got signed off, we had a security guard with us who was literally 2 feet away from all the props at any time. And then we had 2 clients, couple of people from the agency, And then for this instance, I had to use a couple of models as well, because we only had one day to shoot stuff, and also we wanted to dress them up in stormtrooper stuff and whatever props we were using. So I came up with the six concepts. So it was quite mind-boggling at first, because I was roaming the streets, and I remember looking at big theater doors and thinking, oh, that could be the entrance for a spaceship or a secret entrance for something. And then I would look at graffiti tunnels for where the rebellions might hang out. So there was a contrast between looking for kind of really clinical places for the Empire, clinical, very clean, quite modern, and then looking for really dark and gritty areas for the rebellion.
I can't imagine these places were necessarily easy to find, though.
I mean, a lot of the time, finding these scenarios and then like, how could I work the props in? So once I got the props confirmed, I would go back to the location list, working closely with the agents, say, okay, we've got this great graffiti tunnel near Waterloo Station. And what we could do is we could put the stormtrooper helmet on the floor, and then we could shoot it, and then probably have some people just coming in kind of soft focus.
Yeah.
And the story there could be that either this stormtrooper's left the Empire and joined the rebellion, or he's just got beaten up by two rebellion people.
Okay.
And I remember on the day we arrived after, doing lots of recce's at the location. And this is a tunnel which has no cars or any kind of transport vehicles going through it. But there were roadworks right at the end of the tunnel.
No, right.
And the client was like, oh, do you want to move on to another location? And I was like, hang on a second. All these guys are wearing like high-vis outfits. Isn't that what like X-Wing fighters wear? Or, they look like pilots. And if we put them in a soft focus as they walk towards us, this could work even better for like the shot that we're trying to create. And the client was like, okay, let's give it a go. So put the helmet on the floor, and I remember the security guard was like right next to it in case someone ran up and tried to snatch it or anything. And yeah, it was serendipity. The two road workers / X-Wing fighters came into soft focus in the back. I made sure I got them, made sure I had the helmet in full focus, and we got the shot. So, that was one of the scenarios. And I remember another story when, I don't know if anyone's ever tried to shoot at Canary Wharf Station. It's quite difficult. They have a lot of security guards there. And again, we had this whole team of people. The concept here was that we would have, again, the stormtrooper helmet, but this time it was just going to be sat on the side of our model. Right. And this was the concept was, oh, this is just a stormtrooper on his way home. So definitely in my style of, photography.
Just another day at the office kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we did dress the scene a little bit, and we made a wrap for the Metro. So the model was holding a Metro
newspaper, the Metro
and
newspaper.
So we made a wrap which had some propaganda, and it was all done in the font the typography that Star Wars use in this language I don't understand, but agency put that together, and we put that in front of the Metro and put the helmet next to them. And I remember I just said to the team, look, we're going to get kicked out if we all go down there, so just let me and the model go down, we'll set up, get the shot done, and get out really quickly. And they allowed us to do that for that particular shot, because otherwise there was no way we would have got that shot.
I did not realize that Canary Wharf, you'd essentially done what they call guerrilla shooting here, that you'd gone in, got it, and got out. How did that afterwards then? Was there any problem with using the underground in a commercial sense in this respect?
Well, there wasn't, surprisingly, and
okay.
I remember it got like over 2 million likes on the Disney Channel, and there was no backlash whatsoever. And I was actually surprised that they didn't want to pay for it. Normally they'll be like, okay, we don't want any trouble, we'll just pay what we need to pay for the 1 hour or 2 hours. But they were like, no, let's just do it.
And that was the same with every location, was it?
Yep.
Wow,
yeah.
That's a lovely part of the story. Years and years and years ago, I was doing a photo shoot with somebody who, with her husband, had worked on set of Star Wars for some stunt work. And they managed to, when I went in the house, I said, "That's not a stormtrooper's helmet, is it?" I'm not sure they were supposed to have it. And by what you're saying, it sounds to me that they are like closely guarded crown jewels.
Oh, yes. Yeah, indeed. I mean, I couldn't believe how nervous the security guard was. And he was just, every time I'd put it on the floor or put it on the side, he'd be like, "Am I in frame? No, you're not in frame." Okay, so he'd be as close as he could to it possibly. But I was glad he was there, because I ended up using him in one of the shots as well.
Did you?
And I think one more point I'd like to add is that Disney, they did request that I like Photoshop stuff. They were like, "Oh, in this scene you could Photoshop things, and in the selfie one, let's see if we can get rid of all the cars." And I said, "No, that's just not my thing. It doesn't work to our story. It's supposed to be set in today, but with the Star Wars story overlaid on top."
A question you would not have faced on the Fujicast when we spoke, and certainly not when you were on stage as well, when I shared, it was an honour to introduce you to stage, is one that may have you thinking about your entire career and why you do this thing. I ask at the end of each interview, why? I say to myself that I'm just a really curious person, and I love to create things. I love to make things. And I think with doing what I do, I'm constantly challenged with new briefs. And then for me to be able to have, essentially a lot of control over the creativity, I just love doing that. And the fact that there's not generally a right or wrong with what we do, that always excites me as well. So I just love I love to create things. I love to come up with ideas, and then being able to make them myself. There's just a level of satisfaction and almost adrenaline that I get from just being able to do it. So I think that would be my why.
And my sincere thanks today to Mr. Whisper for being our guest on the show. And that's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and want to walk a little further together, then the Extra Mile edition number 97 is waiting for you. John Wildgoose is my guest, an extra miler with 40 years of photographic experience behind him, worked for two of the country's largest national newspapers, has some very interesting thoughts on making photographs of strangers, which is also an episode we have in a special in a couple of weeks' time. And he's also about to become a YouTuber with an adventure that he's about to make. And I have a feeling we're going to be talking to him more over the next couple of months.
On this week's Extra Mile.
I must have been 12, 13 years old, and I was wandering around one of the grey, low-rise housing estates near where I lived, and I photographed a yellow truck. And I remember being kind of struck by this yellow truck parked in a housing estate. And the picture that I took of it, to this day, I've lost the print, unfortunately, but it's in my head with such clarity that looking back on it, I think that was the point when my brain said, yeah, you're a visual person and you look at the world in this way. And I think that was an important moment.
Now, the first 5 minutes of the show is available for free. So click the link on the website for the Extra Mile, and you can listen to it. Our PS to the show is to come, but before that, we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to. Oh, there goes the post office van. It's so unusual to see a van in the woodland here around Greenham Common. That was it, though. That's your van for the day. Yes, the play-out song to come, just to make some final frames to. I'll think about what's been said today, and I'm going to go upbeat and a bit left field today. Interestingly, the Extra Milers were invited to take part in a production meeting poll, as I call them, where we were deciding whether to keep the play-out song or not. Every now and then I have a little spring, or in this case summer clean of features, and that was one the production duster was readying itself for, but it seems overwhelmingly the vote is to keep it. Where's that aeroplane? Can you just pop over, please? I'm trying to finish the show in veritable peace and quiet. Anyway, the poll runs for another week on the Extra Mile. Often the songs are quite calming, aren't they? They're chosen with thoughtfulness or mindfulness. Something that's deliciously smooth, usually. But not today, no. Today, with Mally about to arrive on my doorstep for a weekend of adventures and photo walks, I'm quite excited and upbeat. And I need something to match the energy of Mr. Whisper's fabulous low-light street pictures of vibrant London, or the wondrous silliness of a stormtrooper waiting for the train home on a London tube station. So I'm going to go upbeat as our play out today for a song by Gideon Shocken, featuring vocals from Denisha. It's only a couple of minutes long, so it's one of those blink and you'll miss songs, but I think the energy is right. And Mally, I'm talking to you now, if you're listening, which I think you intended to on your drive down, all those hours you've been in the van, in the Wonder Bus as you make your way south right now, roll down the window, stick your arm out, and move your head back and forth like that puppet called Flat Eric, who for one summer in 1999 was quite the star across the world.
Haven't we made it, my love? Oh, honey, look how we made it this far. Hasn't the pace been a long bit, honey? But take a look at where we are. Haven't we made it, my love? Oh, honey, look how we made it this far. Hasn't the pace been a long bit, honey? But take a look at where we are. Isn't the day so exciting? Oh, honey, when I wake up, I'm feeling brand new. All I can say is I look like new money, and the only thing I know is true. I owe it to you, you. I owe it to you, you. I owe it to you, you. I owe it to you. 'Cause shine like a ray from the sun. There's something people look for but never can find. I swear you're the gold I've been running for, honey, like I woke up and won the top prize. So many days spinning cold and too lonely, sitting all the time living in blue. All I can say is I look like new money, and the only thing I know is true. I owe it to you, you. I owe it to you, you. I owe it to you, you. I owe it to you.
The wonderful voice of Denisha with I Owe It To You, which, by the way, equally could be a song about you for supporting this little show of ours, walking together each week. Did that work for you, Mally of the Trees, with your arm out the window? And Sir Philip of Ferris, who's probably still trying to find a place that's open for a coffee. Come on, Kathy, I promise you, there's one just down here. Oh, Phil, we've been walking now 5 days. I need a coffee. Well, we're done for another week. So let's make a final sketchbook picture. I'm back in woodland. I've kept to woodland today because it's been at times a bit windy, although it seems to have calmed right now. I met a wonderful man about, hold on, here we go. Shutter speed 1/2/5, 5.6, f5.6. It's getting a bit more shadowed in the woodland. ISO 500. Yes, I met her. Here we go. Here's the picture. I'll pop that up with my sketchbook images on the show page today, which is full of stuff today. You really have to go visit, please. Wonderful man. He was out documenting butterflies of the common, and he told me some stuff about, I should have recorded it. Oh, Neil, you're not going to do another one of those I should have recorded it stories. I'm afraid I am. But we had a conversation where he said there's depleted butterflies across the common, and that's because of the overgrazing and all the cows that are here that are supposed to be taken off during the winter. It was an ancient law that I think is coming back, that if you don't take your cows off common land, then they can be taken from you and sold at market. And the overgrazing is causing some kinds of wildlife issues. See? Every day is a school day. So just a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. We'll keep building this wonderful community of kindness in the photographic and walking world together, a safe place to share our thoughts about this thing that we love and do, photographing and walking. I understand from Neil Ford, who's in charge of all the flashing lights at HQ, that those nice people at Spotify now let you leave comments for the show. So please, if you've enjoyed this or other episodes, please feel free to leave a comment or review. And the same if you use the Apple app. Those reviews mean more to us than you can possibly imagine. They really do. My thanks also, hang on, is that a horsefly on my head? I got bitten the other day right just above my eye. And it came up. Oh, it's horrible it was. You know, I don't have the best of looks, at the best of times. I don't need that as well. My thanks also to Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell, who looks after our Facebook members, write a postscript for the show. Now, I really wanted one about legacy, which sort of handholds that very first letter today from a very special letter from our friend Matt Bobby. And there are so many about legacy, as you could probably imagine. Andy Warhol, the idea is not to live forever, but to create something that will. Then there's Maya Angelou, who said, you have no idea what your legacy will be because your legacy is every life you touch. Oh, I like that one. That could have been the PS. But I've chosen this from Pericles. What, Neil? You've gone all highbrow on us again. The ancient Athenian democrat, the orator, the thinker, who said roughly 2,500 years ago, give or take, what you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but what's woven into the lives of others.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.